Her daughter dismantled her bed and left a cardboard sign in its place. Floors enough for someone who doesn't work. Emma Wexler, widow and former caregiver, didn't beg for an explanation. She'd just paid their rent, again, and come home to silence. By morning, she'd accept a job they didn't know she had and move out without leaving a note. She'd spent decades being their safety net. Now she was done being their floor. And when they came calling, her absence would answer louder than she ever did. "We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe." The key turned in the lock, but there was no welcome, just a cold silence inside. Emma nudged the front door open with her shoulder, a brown paper grocery bag tucked against her hip. The quiet hit her first. Not the comforting hush of a house at rest, but the kind that followed arguments or unfinished confessions. The kind that listened back. No voices, no footsteps, no faint thrum of television upstairs. Just her own breath and the rustle of her keys against the worn strap of her purse. She set the bag down on the kitchen counter and listened. Nothing. Not even the usual chaos of her sons, Dylan and Max, clattering through cupboards or arguing over who drank the last of the juice. No half-laughed excuse from her daughter Grace about why the dishes still weren't done. Just silence. She called out, once, just their names, not loud, testing the air. Still, no answer. She walked slowly down the hallway, her shoes clicking against the floorboards that had needed refinishing for years. Her coat brushed against the framed photos on the wall, smiling children in Halloween costumes, beach vacations from a decade ago, a younger version of herself holding birthday cakes with candles, always just one wish too short. At her bedroom door she paused. The light was off. She pushed it open, then froze. Her bed, gone. Or rather, dismantled. The mattress was propped on its side against the wall. The frame lay in a tangle of wood and screws, pieces deliberately unscrewed and dropped in a pile beside her nightstand. Sheets twisted and discarded. Her pillow, crumpled like it had been stepped on. And in the middle of the hardwood floor, a cardboard sign, its edges curling inward from moisture or carelessness. Block letters, thick, black ink. "Floor's enough for someone who doesn't work." Emma blinked. Once. Twice. The words didn't change. The room stayed still. Her hands dropped to her sides, fingers trembling against the fabric of her coat. She looked around, not for answers exactly, but for reason. A prank? A joke gone wrong? But it wasn't the kind of thing her children would joke about. Not lately. Not since the pandemic hit and she'd been laid off. Not since the shifts at the diner disappeared. Not since she'd used the last of her retirement to keep their electricity on through winter, and then covered Grace's missed rent again, just this morning. Her throat tightened. She stepped carefully over the broken frame and picked up the sign. The letters were familiar. Grace's handwriting. The G curved just so. Emma lowered herself to the floor, legs folded, the cardboard across her lap. She stared at the empty space where her bed had been. Not stolen. Removed. By them. Her children. For what? Punishment? A statement? She tried to remember, had she said something? Forgotten a birthday? Criticized too much? Or not enough? Or maybe this was about the groceries, the rent, the slow drain of love turning into obligation. A clock ticked somewhere behind her. The sound suddenly too loud. She looked around her room, the one place that had always been hers, and it felt foreign now, like a shell. Like someone else had moved in and erased her name from the walls. Emma's fingers tightened around the sign. The silence in the house changed. It thickened, turned cold. She set the sign aside and stood, slow and unsteady, her knees creaking. Then she turned, toward the hallway, toward the quiet. She was no longer just confused. She was afraid, because something had shifted, and it wasn't just the bed. She walked slowly, deliberately, her fingers grazing the wall as she moved down the hall, passing her children's doors, closed, every one of them. And behind one of them, she was sure now, someone was awake. Someone had watched her come home. Someone was waiting. I stood frozen, reading the sign, not knowing if it was a joke or a cruel reminder of how far I had fallen. Emma sat on the bare floor, the cardboard sign curled in her lap like a verdict. Her back ached from the cold wood, her coat still clinging to her shoulders. She hadn't even taken off her shoes. She stared across the room at the place her bed had been, now just an echo of comfort. Her hands were trembling, not from shock, but from restraint. Rage stirred behind her ribs, unfamiliar and hot. But grief dulled its edge. She pulled her phone from her coat pocket. Her thumb hesitated, then tapped Sarah's name. Rang once, twice. Voicemail. She didn't leave one. Ethan next. Voicemail again. She tapped out a text to them both. "Please call me. I need to understand." It felt too small, too clean. But she hit send. The room stayed quiet. She pressed her back against the wall and let the phone rest on her thigh. The silence wasn't just absence anymore, it was rejection. Deliberate, designed. Her chest ached. They were her children, her babies once. Sarah had been the one with night terrors, Ethan the quiet one who used to fall asleep against her arm during movies. She had braided Sarah's hair every morning until middle school, driven Ethan to soccer in the pouring rain even after 12-hour shifts. Where had that gone? When had it changed? She traced the last few years in her mind like wounds, the unspoken resentment, the constant requests for money, the way every conversation had turned into a negotiation. She remembered Sarah's voice last week, flat, clipped, asking for help with rent again. "You said you'd take care of us." Like it was owed. Like Emma hadn't already given everything. The rent was paid, and this was the return. She stared at the message thread. No new responses, no bubbles, no sign of life. Her thumb hovered again, then typed, "I love you. Whatever this is, we can talk. Please. Send." Still nothing. Her heart pounded harder now. She stood and paced, the sign abandoned on the floor. Every creak of the boards under her feet echoed. She felt it rising. The realization, thick and sour. They weren't coming. Not to help, not to explain, not even to argue. They had made a statement. Floor's enough for someone who doesn't work. She clenched her jaw, fists curling at her sides. The bed wasn't just a symbol of rest. It had been her last, small comfort. They knew what they were doing. The silence swelled again, too big for the walls to contain. Emma moved to the kitchen, needing motion. She opened a cupboard. Empty. Another. Half a box of cereal. No milk. The fridge hummed quietly, offering little more. She realized then how much she'd been carrying, paying bills, buying groceries, smoothing over their disappointments, saying yes, yes, yes when she meant I can't anymore. And now this. The screen of her phone lit up. A text. Sarah. Emma grabbed it, a small hope tugging, then froze. "You're a failure, Mom. It's your problem now." Her fingers slackened. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. She didn't pick it up. She just stood there, staring at the cabinet, her reflection faint in the dark glass of the microwave. Lined, tired, too still. Not angry anymore. Not even surprised, just broken. And beginning, barely, faintly, to wonder what would happen if she stopped trying to fix what had already chosen to leave. "I couldn't remember the last time I felt like a mother to them instead of a servant." Emma sat at the edge of the kitchen chair, arms folded tightly across her chest, eyes fixed on the blank tile beneath the table. The text still echoed in her head, each word a slap she hadn't seen coming. "You're a failure, Mom." It was easier, for now, not to look at her phone again, easier to stay in the quiet, even if it stung. She took a deep breath, pressed her fingertips against her temples. Her head throbbed. Not from exhaustion, but from the weight of everything she hadn't said for years. She had given them everything, every overtime hour, every late-night ride, every small dream she'd once tucked into her purse before work, vacations she didn't take, friends she stopped calling, joys she couldn't afford. And still they looked at her like she'd failed them. When had she stopped being their mother? When had she become this? She pushed up from the table, walked back to her room, still gutted, the mattress still leaning like an accusation. The sign lay half crumpled now, stepped on and forgotten. She bent to pick it up, then stopped. She didn't need to read it again. She tossed it into the trash. Her coat still hung by the door. She reached for it out of habit, digging into the inside pocket where she kept old receipts and expired coupons. Instead, her fingers brushed something smooth. The card. She'd forgotten she'd tucked it there. The one from Lisa at the community center. "Call me," it said. "There might be something opening up soon. You'd be perfect." Emma held the card like it might vanish, her breath catching. She hadn't thought about that conversation in days. Not since everything at home had unraveled. She sat on the bed frame, card still in hand, and stared at the window. Pale sunlight flickered through the blinds. Outside, life moved on. Cars passing, birds chirping, neighbors walking dogs. No one looking in, no one seeing this house for what it was. She turned the card over. Lisa's number was still there. She pulled out her phone. The screen of her phone lit up. A text, "Sarah." Emma grabbed it, a small hope tugging, then froze. "You're a failure, Mom. It's your problem now." Her fingers slackened. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. She didn't pick it up. She just stood there, staring at the cabinet, her reflection faint in the dark glass of the microwave, lined, tired, too still, not angry anymore, not even surprised, just broken, and beginning, barely, faintly, to wonder what would happen if she stopped trying to fix what had already chosen to leave. "I couldn't remember the last time I felt like a mother to them, instead of a servant." Emma sat at the edge of the kitchen chair, arms folded tightly across her chest, eyes fixed on the blank tile beneath the table. The text still echoed in her head, each word a slap she hadn't seen coming. "You're a failure, Mom." It was easier for now not to look at her phone again. Easier to stay in the quiet, even if it stung. She took a deep breath, pressed her fingertips against her temples. Her head throbbed, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of everything she hadn't said for years. She had given them everything. Every overtime hour, every late-night ride, every small dream she'd once tucked into her purse before work, vacations she didn't take, friends she stopped calling, joys she couldn't afford. And still, they looked at her like she'd failed them. When had she stopped being their mother? When had she become this? She pushed up from the table, walked back to her room, still gutted, the mattress still leaning like an accusation. The sign lay half-crumpled now, stepped on and forgotten. She bent to pick it up, then stopped. She didn't need to read it again. She tossed it into the trash. Her coat still hung by the door. She reached for it out of habit, digging into the inside pocket where she kept old receipts and expired coupons. Instead, her fingers brushed something smooth. The card. She'd forgotten she'd tucked it there. The one from Lisa at the community center. "Call me," it said. "There might be something opening up soon. You'd be perfect." Emma held the card like it might vanish, her breath catching. She hadn't thought about that conversation in days, not since everything at home had unraveled. She sat on the bed frame, card still in hand, and stared at the window. Pale sunlight flickered through the blinds. Outside, life moved on, cars passing, birds chirping, neighbors walking dogs. No one looking in, no one seeing this house for what it was. She turned the card over. Lisa's number was still there. She pulled out her phone. The screen lit up. 3 unread messages from Ethan. She didn't open them. She dialed. 2 rings. Then Lisa answered, her voice warm, surprised, genuine. "Emma, I'm so glad you called." Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. "Is the job still—" Lisa jumped in. "Yes, the grant went through. It's part-time at first, youth outreach at the center, but we'd bring you on full-time by summer. It's yours if you want it. I need someone who's already lived the hard parts." Emma's chest fluttered. A job, not just hours at the diner, not another shift taken because she couldn't say no. Real work, her own. "But," Lisa added gently, "I need an answer by tomorrow. End of day." "Tomorrow." Emma nodded slowly, even though Lisa couldn't see it. "Okay, I'll call you back." She hung up and sat there. A job meant stability. It also meant change. She couldn't keep paying everyone's rent, couldn't be the human safety net they walked all over. She'd have to say no. to a lot, and maybe lose them in the process. Or maybe they'd finally see her, not as someone to be used, but as a person, as a woman. Emma's eyes welled, not from sadness, but the dizzy edge of possibility. She pressed the card to her chest, then her phone rang again. She looked down. Lisa. Calling back already. She hesitated, then picked up. Emma, Lisa said, voice tense now. Sorry to call again so soon, but if you want the job, I need to know in the next hour. Another applicant just walked in. Emma stared out the window. The sun was higher now. Everything looked the same. But inside her, something was shifting. 1 hour. For the first time in years, I wasn't sure I could go on doing this alone. Emma sat at the kitchen table, her phone cradled in her palm like a live grenade. The minute hand on the wall clock ticked louder than it should have, eating into the hour Lisa had given her. Her thumb hovered over the call icon, then dropped, back to the table. She didn't move. Couldn't. The job offer pulsed in her mind, luminous and terrifying. Real. Tangible. A door creaked open after so many years of being locked out. But if she stepped through it, what would she be leaving behind? Her children. Her children. Even if they resented her, even if they saw her as little more than a bank account with tired eyes and cracked hands, they were still hers, and for better or worse, she had stayed. Through. Every mess, every slammed door, every phone call that began with, "Mom, I need..." But this job, it was her own. It wouldn't fix everything, wouldn't buy back time or love or the version of motherhood she once imagined. But it might give her something she hadn't had in years. Control, and maybe a chance to matter. To herself. Emma exhaled and stood, walked into the living room, where the mattress still leaned awkwardly against the wall. She pressed her hand against it, then let it fall away. This wasn't her sanctuary anymore. This house had stopped feeling like home the moment her presence became invisible. She pulled out her phone again. Typed. "Can we talk? Please. I just need 5 minutes. That's all." She hit send. To Sarah? To Ethan. Then she waited. Seconds turned to minutes. She moved back to the kitchen, opened the fridge, stared inside. Still almost nothing. As if her hunger would reveal some deeper truth. The screen lit up. Incoming call. Sarah. Emma's heart lurched. She answered. Before she could speak, Sarah's voice barreled through. "I need rent again. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. But I am. So, can you send it today?" Emma closed her eyes. No hello, no pause, no mention of the sign. The texts, the silence. Just another need, another withdrawal. She steadied her breath. "I got a job offer," she said quietly. Silence. Then, "What does that have to do with anything?" "It means I'll have to make changes. I won't be able to keep helping like before." A beat. "You promised, Mom," Sarah snapped. "You said you'd always take care of us." "I said I'd always love you," Emma replied, her voice firmer now. "I never said I'd never stop sacrificing myself. You've never sacrificed anything." The words hit harder than Emma expected. Her fingers tightened around the phone. "I gave you everything," she said, "and it still wasn't enough." Sarah scoffed. "So you're just gonna walk away now? Because what? You finally got a little job?" Emma flinched, but she didn't back down. "I'm saying no," she said. The silence that followed was cold, stretched. Then Sarah's voice, low, shaking with anger. "You'll just keep doing it, right?" Emma froze. She knew what Sarah meant. The pattern, the expectation. That Emma would cave, that she'd pay, apologize, make it better, that she'd stay small so everyone else could keep feeling big. Emma stared out the window, the sun cresting higher, casting a warm stripe across the kitchen floor. The hour was nearly up. "No," she said quietly, then waited for the answer. Her voice cracked. She wasn't just asking for money anymore. She was accusing me of failing her. Sarah's silence was short-lived, and then the floodgates opened. "You never wanted us to grow up," she snapped, voice sharp with something deeper than anger. "You made everything about you. You always do. You complain about what you've given us, but you chose it, Mom. You made us need you, and now you're mad that we do." Emma stood in the middle of the kitchen, the phone pressed to her ear, body cold with disbelief. "That's not fair," she said, barely above a whisper. But Sarah was already running with it. "Dad left and you made us your whole identity. You didn't live your life. You just buried yourself in ours. And now you want to what? Start over? Now that we're broken and broke?" Emma felt her knees wobble. She sat slowly, the chair creaking beneath her. Her hand trembled. "I gave you everything," she repeated, but it didn't land. Sarah's breath hitched through the phone. "And it was never about us. It was about you needing to feel like the hero, like the good mom. Well, you weren't. You were just tired and angry and always making us feel like we owed you for existing." The line went dead. Emma didn't realize how long she sat staring at the floor, the phone still clutched in her hand, until a robin chirped outside the window and startled her back to herself. The silence that followed felt brutal. The house didn't echo, it absorbed, swallowed. She leaned her elbows on the table and buried her face in her hands. Sarah's words curled in her mind like smoke. Some parts cut, some parts were unfair, and some, worst of all, some parts were true. She had needed to feel needed. She had let their reliance on her become her purpose, not because she was noble, because she was afraid they'd leave if they didn't need her. And now that they didn't, at least not emotionally, not lovingly, they blamed her anyway. For staying, for giving, for never knowing how to say no until it was too late. She stood and paced the kitchen, trying to find air in a room that seemed to shrink with every step. She dialed Ethan. It rang once, twice. Voicemail. She tried again. Same. By the third call, it went straight to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. Couldn't. She gripped the counter, knuckles white. She wasn't angry at them, not yet. But something inside her had shifted. A slow, hot current of resentment. Not hatred. Never. But exhaustion. Disappointment. The first stirrings of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She was tired of being hurt by the people she loved most. The door creaked as she moved to the mailbox, hoping for anything that might pull her from the spiral. She pulled out a single envelope, thin, white, too formal, her name printed neatly. No handwriting. She knew the weight of it before she opened it. From the bank. She stood in the driveway, tearing the seal with stiff fingers. Late notice. Mortgage overdue. Due immediately. Emma blinked. She read it again. Then again. It didn't matter how many times she read it. The numbers didn't change. The past due notice glared up at her like a final, silent verdict. She sank down onto the porch step, the envelope crinkling in her hands. No safety net. No bed. No money. No support. The one thing she had, a chance at stability, at independence, hung by a thread she'd nearly talked herself out of grabbing. Now the decision wasn't just emotional, it was survival. I stared at the letter in disbelief. How did I let it get this far? Emma sat on the porch step long after the wind had scattered the petals from her neighbor's hanging plant across the driveway. The letter was still clutched in her hands, creased from how tightly she had held it. Mortgage overdue, 3 months behind. Her own name, printed in neat, indifferent ink, was a stranger's. She barely remembered writing the last check. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe she'd convinced herself that covering Sarah's rent and Ethan's books was somehow more urgent. She hadn't looked at her bank account in days. Weeks? Her eyes burned. The weight of it all, the late nights, the overdraft fees, the way her body sagged more each day like it had been holding too much for too long, it crushed her now, in full. A car passed on the street. Kids rode by on bikes. Somewhere, someone mowed their lawn. The world, relentless in its normalcy. She stood slowly, bones aching, and went back inside. The house felt colder somehow, smaller, the stripped bed, the scuffed floors, the empty pantry. Not a home, not anymore. A waiting room she'd been sitting in for years, hoping her turn would come. She moved to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Her hand shook. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. She leaned on the counter, fingers brushing the bank letter again, now resting beside her phone. The job. Lisa's voice echoed in her head. I need someone who's already lived the hard parts. She had. God, she had. And now she was broke, alone, afraid. But beneath it, layered between the exhaustion and shame, something else stirred. A sharp, desperate clarity. She had been enabling them, giving because she couldn't bear the thought of not being needed, of being the mother who left. But they had already left her. Emotionally, intentionally. Maybe it was time she walked away too, not from them, but from the version of herself that believed this was love. Her phone buzzed. Lisa. Emma inhaled and picked it up. "Hey," Lisa said, voice bright. "Just checking in. I need to lock in the new hire this afternoon. Can I tell them it's you?" Emma stared out the window. "Yes," she said, the word barely more than breath. "Yes, I'll take it." Relief surged through her like warmth from a sun she hadn't felt in years. Lisa laughed. "You won't regret it. First day's Monday. We'll get you started with intake. I'm so glad, Emma." She hung up. Emma set the phone down carefully. Then it rang again. She blinked. Sarah. Emma hesitated. The phone buzzed. Then again. She picked up. "Mom," Sarah said, panicked. "I need you to come now. It's serious." Emma's throat closed. "What is it?" she asked, heart racing despite herself. "My car broke down. I'm stranded, and I've got an interview in an hour. I need help. Please." Emma opened her mouth, but no words came. The job. The letter. Her commitment. Her choice. Sarah's voice cracked on the other end. "Please, Mom, I'm begging you." The word emergency was too familiar, and I knew deep down I would always show up for them. Emma was in the car before she realized she hadn't changed out of the sweatshirt she'd slept in. The wheel felt foreign in her hands, stiff with the weight of old obligations. The engine hummed, the air stifling even with the windows cracked. Sarah's voice still rang in her ears. An interview, broken down car. Please, Mom. She told herself she wasn't doing this to be the hero. Not this time. She was just helping. Just showing up. Again. It was what mothers did, wasn't it? But as she turned the corner onto Maple and saw Sarah, standing upright, phone in one hand, sipping from an iced coffee in the other, Emma's foot hesitated on the brake. No panic, no urgency. Just a girl scrolling Instagram while waiting for her mother to arrive. Emma pulled up slowly. Sarah didn't rush. She walked to the passenger side with the same practiced nonchalance she always carried when things didn't go her way. Emma rolled down the window. Sarah leaned in, annoyed. "I just need you to drop me off a couple miles up. It's not even far." "What happened to the emergency?" Emma asked, voice tight. Sarah shrugged. "It's not that bad. I called a friend to look at the car later. I just didn't want to be late for the interview." Emma gripped the steering wheel. "You could have called a ride." "I don't have money for a lift, Mom, and I knew you'd come." There it was. That casual confidence, the certainty that Emma would always bend. The silence stretched. Sarah frowned. "Are we going or not?" Emma stared ahead. Something cold unfurled in her chest. Not anger exactly, more like erosion. The slow dissolving of something sacred. She wanted to scream, but instead she drove. Each block passed in quiet tension, her hands tight on the wheel. Sarah barely glanced up from her phone. At the drop-off, she mumbled thanks without looking up. Emma watched her daughter walk away, heels clicking, shoulders square. No backward glance, no recognition of what it cost Emma to show up. Again. When she returned home, the quiet hit her differently. Not hollow, just empty. The kind of silence that didn't mourn anymore. She dropped her keys on the counter. Her breath hitched, but no tears came. She was past that now. This wasn't grief. It was something harder. Truth. They didn't see her. Not really. Not as a woman. Not as a person with edges and limits and needs. She was the safety net. The ride, the rent, the yes. Always the yes. She poured herself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. The job acceptance still fresh in her mind. It wasn't just a decision. It was a lifeline. Her phone buzzed. She didn't move to check it. Another buzz, then a third. Finally, she picked it up. One text. From Ethan. "I need you, Mom. Don't leave me too." Emma froze. The glass slipped from her fingers and hit the floor, not shattering, just tipping, spilling water like a small, silent offering. I sat in the silence, realizing I had been living their life, not mine. Emma sat at the table long after the water had soaked into the floorboards. The text from Ethan blinked on her screen, each word burrowing deeper than the last. "Don't leave me too." She read it twice more before standing, wiping her palms on her jeans. No anger, no panic, just resolve, quiet and sharp. She sent one message: "Be here in an hour, both of you." No emoji, no softening, just that. Then she cleaned up the glass. She didn't tidy the rest of the kitchen. She didn't fluff the couch pillows or wipe the smudges off the mirror in the hallway. Let them see it as it was. Let them see her as she was. At 3:47 p.m., Sarah walked in first, expression guarded but curious. Ethan arrived 5 minutes later, shoulders hunched, hoodie pulled tight around his face like armor. Neither said hello. Emma sat in the armchair by the window, one hand curled around a cold cup of coffee. "Sit," she said. They did. Not like children, like strangers waiting for a verdict. She looked at them. Really looked. The worn-out shoes, the dark circles under Ethan's eyes, the twitch in Sarah's jaw when she was trying not to cry. For a brief moment she saw them as they were years ago, one clinging to her leg in a thunderstorm, the other whispering secrets over cereal. But that moment passed. "You've both made it very clear how you feel about me," she began, voice steady. Ethan's eyes flicked to Sarah, who sat stiffly, her arms folded. "I'm not going to list what I've given. That's not why we're here. You already know, and if you don't, you will someday." Sarah looked away. "What I am going to say," Emma continued, "is that I can't keep doing this. The fixing, the rescuing, the giving without being seen." Ethan shifted in his seat. "I didn't mean to," he started. She held up her hand. "You didn't have to, that's the point." Sarah's voice cut in. "So you're just done being our mom?" Emma blinked at her. "I'm done being your martyr." The room dropped into silence. Sarah opened her mouth but no words came, just a flicker of something in her eyes. Anger, maybe. Or guilt. "I took a job," Emma said. "It's mine, not yours. It's not to pay your rent or fix your car or keep food in your fridge." Ethan looked down. "I need something for me now," she said. "And I think, deep down, you both knew this day was coming." Sarah scoffed. "You waited until we had nothing to say that?" Emma's voice dropped. I waited until I had nothing left." Sarah stood, pacing. "You act like we're villains. We didn't ask for this. We didn't ask for Dad to leave, for you to drown in work, for everything to get so broken." Emma watched her. "I know," she said softly, "but you never asked what I needed either." Sarah paused, biting her lip, and then it cracked. "I didn't know how, okay?" Her voice splintered. "You never showed weakness. You were always just there, unbreakable. We leaned on you because we thought we could." Emma stood slowly. "I was never unbreakable," she said. "You just never looked close enough." Silence. Ethan's voice came small. "What happens now?" Emma took a breath. "You start your lives, and I start mine again. We find our way back, maybe. Or we don't. But it's time to try something different." Sarah's shoulders slumped. Then she said it, barely a whisper. "Maybe it's too late for us to fix this. This was it. Either I took control of my life or I'd lose everything." Emma sat in the quiet again, but it was different now. Not cold, not cruel, just still. The kids had left without slamming doors, but also without hugs. There'd been no resolution, just an understanding. A shift. She stood at the sink, rinsing a coffee mug, her hands working on autopilot. Her reflection in the window stared back, not haunted, not hardened, just tired. But tired could change. She'd called the clinic that morning, finally booked the therapy appointment she'd been meaning to make for months. Years, maybe. The receptionist was kind, gentle voice, no judgment. They squeezed her in same day. And now, just hours later, Emma sat in the therapist's office, hands clasped in her lap like she was holding something fragile. "I feel like if I leave them," she said, "I'll be abandoning them all over again." The therapist, a silver-haired woman with soft eyes and sharp focus, nodded. "Or maybe, for the first time, you're choosing not to abandon yourself." Emma blinked. "Children," the woman said, "are allowed to struggle, to learn, to fall and get up again. You've been catching them before they hit the ground for so long they never learned how to stand." Emma exhaled, her hands unclenched. She drove home without the radio on. The city passed by like a slideshow, familiar but not comforting. When she got in, the house was empty again. She placed her keys on the hook, picked up her phone, stared at the contact for Lisa. The job, the beginning. This is it, she thought. My turn. But guilt hovered just behind her ribs. What if Sarah was right? What if it was too late? What if walking away now was the one thing her children never forgave? She walked into the bedroom, sat on the edge of the stripped frame, and opened her phone again. Her thumb hovered over the call button. One tap, and she'd be choosing something different. Not better, just hers. She inhaled. Then the phone rang. Sarah. Emma froze. Not again. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something in her, maybe habit, maybe hope, answered. Sarah's voice trembled. "Mom?" Emma closed her eyes. "Yeah?" A pause. Then, "I don't know how to do this without you." Emma didn't speak. Sarah swallowed audibly. "I keep trying to be angry, to blame you, but I think I just don't know who I am without you fixing things." Emma felt her throat tighten. "I'm not asking for anything," Sarah said quickly. I needed to say that." Emma leaned back against the wall, eyes burning. She didn't know if this was an apology. She didn't know if it changed anything. But it was real, and for now, that was enough. She looked at her phone screen. Lisa's name still waiting beneath Sarah's. She wiped her cheek, took a breath, and made her choice. "I thought I'd be weak, but walking out felt like breathing for the first time in years." Emma didn't cry as she packed. She thought she might, thought she'd crumble halfway through folding sweaters she hadn't worn in months, or when she wrapped the photo of Sarah and Ethan from that camping trip in '09. But the tears never came. Instead, there was calm. Not the numb kind, the earned kind. Every drawer she closed was a boundary formed. Every cabinet emptied was a promise kept. To herself. The apartment was small, second floor, no elevator, just a sun-faded welcome mat and a view of the laundromat across the street. The wallpaper peeled at the corners. The fridge rattled when it kicked on. But it was hers. And that was enough. She moved in with 2 boxes, a suitcase, and her favorite mug, the one with the chip on the handle and the faded blue glaze that had survived 3 dishwashers and 1 divorce. That night, she stood in the middle of the empty kitchen, barefoot on cold tile, the echo of her own breath louder than any grief. She made tea on a borrowed hot plate and sat cross-legged on the floor, staring out the window at the street lamp flickering in rhythm. No voices, no footsteps, no one needing anything from her. She sipped slowly, letting the stillness settle deep. It didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like arrival. She texted them both before bed. Just 2 messages. To Ethan, "I love you. I always will. But I'm building something new now. I hope someday you'll be part of it again." To Sarah, "This isn't goodbye, but I'm letting go, for both our sakes." No reply that night. Emma slept on a mattress on the floor, borrowed sheets, 1 blanket, and the quiet hum of the fridge like a lullaby. She slept hard, dreamless, deep. In the morning, she walked to the community center early. No makeup, no performance, just herself. Lisa smiled when she walked in. "You showed up," she said, like it meant more than attendance. Emma nodded. "I'm ready." The work was messy, humbling. Women arriving in tears, children clinging, paperwork piling, but Emma moved through it with something like grace, something like certainty. Each thank you landed softly but firmly in her chest. She didn't tell anyone about the house, or the kids. She didn't need to. That part of her life wasn't gone. It just wasn't the story she was telling now. Later that week, she hung a thrifted curtain across the apartment window. picked up a used lamp that hummed faint jazz when turned just right. She bought herself a plant, something green and stubborn. It started small, a smile she didn't check in the mirror, a stretch in the morning without rushing, a sandwich eaten slowly, without interruption. Freedom, she discovered, didn't scream. It whispered. On Friday evening, she stood by the window sipping tea again, watching headlights pass like constellations in motion. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't reach for it immediately. She finished her sip, then pulled it out. A message. Sarah. Just 3 words. We need to talk. Emma stared at the screen. She didn't move. Not yet. Because for once, the next step was hers to choose. I hadn't been able to breathe freely in years, but now I was learning how to take my own space back. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and lemon cleaner, the kind of scent that said fresh start more than any speech could. Emma stood barefoot by the window, watching the city ease into Saturday. The laundromat doors yawned open across the street, the world beginning its rituals. Her own rituals were smaller now, simpler. Each morning, she brewed coffee in the dented French press she'd found at the thrift store. She wrote in a cheap notebook, just 1 sentence a day. Nothing profound. Today I felt tired but peaceful. The sun came through the curtains at just the right angle. I didn't miss the old house. At first, the quiet felt strange, as if she were waiting for a demand to shatter it, a request for a ride, rent money, a favor. But nothing came. Just the hum of the fridge and the soft creak of the floorboards beneath her feet. She breathed it in, let it fill the spaces where anxiety had lived. Emma started taking walks. Slow ones. No destination, no rush. She'd stop for a coffee she didn't have to share. Once she bought herself a pastry and ate it warm, crumbs dusting her coat, and didn't think about the cost. The job at the center filled her hours. The work was messy, hard, but it gave her something solid. She stayed late to help with intake forms, listened when the women cried, laughed when the kids brought her scribbled pictures of lopsided houses and smiling suns. She made friends, not the kind who needed saving, the kind who saw her, asked how she was, meant it. And yet, when the sun set, when the apartment filled with shadows, the guilt crept in. Small, persistent, the echoes of her children's voices, the way Sarah had said maybe it's too late, the way Ethan had sounded so small on the phone that day. She reached out, but differently now. A text to Sarah. Thinking of you. I'm here when you're ready to talk. A message to Ethan. I hope your classes are going okay. I'd love to hear about them. She didn't expect replies. She didn't ask for anything. Just planted seeds and let them be. Some nights she sat at her small kitchen table, tea cooling between her hands, wondering if they'd ever understand why she left, why she had to. If they'd ever see that it wasn't about abandoning them, but about saving herself. She kept the boundaries firm. No offers of money, no rescues, just love, quietly given, without condition. The apartment became hers in small ways, a new rug found on clearance, a plant that stubbornly survived despite her forgetting to water it. The lamp with its faint jazz hum became her favorite light, the chipped mug, her evening companion. One Thursday, as rain pattered softly on the window, she sat writing in her notebook. Today, I felt strong. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, expecting a reminder or maybe Lisa checking on schedules, but it wasn't. It was Ethan. One line. I miss you, Mom. Emma's breath caught. She stared at the screen, the words blurring for a moment before she blinked the tears away. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, heart racing. Not with fear this time, but with hope. And the knowledge that the next word she chose mattered more than any she'd said before. Freedom came with a price I wasn't ready to pay. Emma typed the reply slowly. I miss you too. Then she hit send. She waited, staring at the phone like it might breathe, but nothing came back. Not immediately. Not that day. And maybe that was okay. The apartment felt warm now, familiar. Her routines had settled into a kind of rhythm, laundry on Saturdays, grocery runs on Tuesdays, her feet up by the window every evening with a book or a notebook in her lap. But still, there were nights when the silence didn't soothe. It swallowed. Nights when she caught herself setting 2 plates out of habit, or waking up from dreams of small children calling Mom and realizing no one was there. Not in the hallway, not on the phone, not in the life she had chosen for herself. The freedom, while real, came wrapped in a kind of ache she hadn't expected. Not longing exactly, more like absence. The echo of closeness she no longer knew how to define. One afternoon she found herself walking past their old house, not intentionally, just wandering, her feet leading where her thoughts didn't want to go. She paused at the curb, watching from beneath her hood as a delivery van pulled away. The blinds were drawn. No one came out. And maybe it was better that way. She turned and kept walking. That night, after work, Lisa offered her a ride home. Emma declined. "I like the walk," she said, "even in the cold." The truth was, walking gave her time. Space. It reminded her that movement itself could be healing, that not every destination had to be someone else's emergency. But even in movement, the questions returned. Had she done enough? Had she waited too long? Had the damage she spent years trying to avoid already sunk its teeth in too deep? At the center, a new woman arrived, early 30s, skittish, her story barely whispered through clenched teeth. Emma sat beside her, not to solve, but to sit. Later that night, Emma jotted in her notebook, "I listened today, and it was enough." She believed it when she wrote it, mostly. But that night, she stood at the sink rinsing a mug and found herself whispering, "Was it?" She wiped her hands and wandered to the window. Outside, the street lamp flickered twice. Somewhere, a dog barked. Life continued in small, unshouted ways. And then, her phone rang. Emma turned slowly. She hadn't changed the ringtone. It still sent a jolt through her chest when it echoed off the tile. Sarah. She stared at the name. 2 seconds. 4. 7. Her thumb hovered. Because freedom, she was learning, didn't always feel good. Sometimes it felt like exile. Sometimes it meant deciding when to open the door again and knowing the cost of doing so. She inhaled. The phone kept ringing. 10 seconds. 12. Then, Emma reached out. But she didn't answer. Not yet. Not without knowing if this was a beginning or just another loop in a story she had finally started rewriting. I was ready to accept my future, but it felt like the past was clawing its way back into my life. Emma didn't answer Sarah's call. She let it ring out until the screen dimmed and the silence folded back around her like a blanket. Frayed, but still familiar. Her hands shook only a little when she set the phone down. She turned off the kitchen light and stood in the dark, the only illumination coming from the street lamp's amber glow. She'd come so far. She had carved out a space that was hers, a rhythm that didn't depend on someone else's urgency. She had learned how to sit with herself and not flinch at the quiet. And yet, that name on her screen had stirred something. Hope? Fear? Guilt? All of them. She sat on the couch, the cushion sighing under her weight, and stared at the tiny clock on the wall. It was late. She could call tomorrow, or not at all. Maybe that's what freedom looked like now, choosing when and if. But when her phone buzzed again 20 minutes later, it wasn't Sarah. It was Ethan. "We're outside." Emma's pulse quickened. She rose, barefoot, and walked to the window. There they were, 2 figures on the sidewalk. Sarah in a coat too thin for the weather, arms crossed like a shield. Ethan with his hands stuffed in his hoodie, his hair longer than she remembered. They didn't look angry. They looked unsure. Emma hesitated. She thought of all the nights she had stayed up worrying, all the times she had swallowed her own needs to meet theirs, all the times they had walked past her pain as if it were furniture. But also, she thought of Sarah's voice breaking over the phone, of Ethan's text, "I miss you, Mom." She opened the door slowly. Neither of them moved. The cold bit at her ankles, but she stood tall, steady. "Can we come in?" Sarah asked. Emma didn't answer. She stepped aside. They entered quietly. No hugging, no tears. Just 3 people carrying more history than their silence could hold. They sat, Sarah on the arm of the couch, Ethan on the floor, legs pulled to his chest. Emma remained standing. "I didn't come to ask for anything," Sarah said after a long beat. Emma raised an eyebrow, waited. "I came to say I was wrong," she continued. "I was scared and angry, and I blamed you because it was easier than blaming myself." Ethan spoke next, soft and halting. "You were always everything. We didn't know how to be anything without you." Emma sat now, the edge of the armchair dipping beneath her. "I let it happen," she said. "I let myself become the structure you leaned on. I thought it was love." Sarah's eyes shimmered. "Maybe it was. Maybe we just didn't know how to carry any of it." Emma nodded slowly. "Maybe none of us did." The clock ticked gently in the background. "I'm not moving back," she said. They both nodded. "I have a life now. It's small, and it's mine, and I won't give it up again, not even for you." Sarah looked down. "We don't want that. We just—" Ethan started, then faltered. "We want to know if you'll let us try again from wherever you are now." Emma's breath caught. This wasn't a plea, it wasn't a trap, it was, maybe, an opening. She looked at them, really looked, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't see burdens. She saw her children, changed, humbled, still hers. She rose slowly, moved to the kitchen, poured 3 glasses of water. No tea, no wine, just water. She set them down. A beginning. Her phone buzzed on the table again. She glanced at it. Unknown number. She picked it up. Sarah and Ethan watched her carefully. She stared at the screen, took a deep breath, and answered. "Healing isn't linear. Sometimes you take 1 step forward and other times you take 2 steps back." Emma kept the phone pressed to her ear for 3 seconds after the line had gone quiet. The voice on the other end was no one she knew. Wrong number. A lost connection. But the silence that followed somehow felt fitting, a soft ending to the night's heavier thread. When she turned back into the room, Sarah and Ethan were quiet, sipping from their glasses like visitors in a waiting room. The overhead light buzzed faintly. The walls of the apartment seemed to draw closer, not in threat, but in intimacy. Emma sat again, the chipped mug from earlier still warm in her hands. Sarah was the first to speak. "I didn't know it could get this far," she said. "The distance, the coldness. I thought you'd just always be there." Emma nodded slowly. "I thought the same about both of you." Ethan's voice was rough. "It felt like you left without warning." Emma looked at him. "I left quietly because I'd already been disappearing in pieces." For years he didn't argue. He just looked away, as if the confession was too sharp to meet head-on. Sarah sat forward, elbows on knees. "I was angry, but I think I was angrier at myself, for not stepping up, for not seeing it sooner." Emma exhaled. "We all missed things." Silence settled again. Then, carefully, she spoke. "I need boundaries now, not to punish, to survive." Sarah nodded. "Okay." Emma's eyes didn't leave hers. "That means no surprise visits? No emergencies that aren't really emergencies? No guilt?" Ethan shifted. "What about birthdays? Dinners?" Emma smiled, a soft one. "Those are welcome, if they come with respect." For a moment, it felt like the air in the room changed, less fragile, less full of ghosts. Sarah pulled her legs up onto the couch and wrapped her arms around her knees. "I miss what we used to be." "I don't," Emma said gently. "Not all of it." Sarah's face tightened, but she nodded. "Yeah, okay." Ethan looked up then. "But maybe we can build something new." Emma didn't speak right away. She looked at their faces, older, wearier, more real than they'd been in years. "Maybe," she said. "If we're honest, if we stop pretending none of it happened." "I'm scared," Ethan said, voice cracking. "Me too," Emma admitted. Sarah reached out, fingers brushing the chipped edge of Emma's mug. "You were never just our mom. We just didn't know how to love you beyond that." Emma blinked, the sting in her eyes sharp and immediate. She reached across the small table, placing her hand gently over Sarah's. Ethan stood suddenly, walked over, and without a word, he bent down and wrapped his arms around her shoulders, tight, certain. "We'll try harder, Mom," he whispered into her hair. "We promise." Emma closed her eyes. and let herself believe it. Just enough for now. I knew there would be bumps along the way, but for the first time, I felt like I could breathe freely. Emma lay in bed that night, the city hum fading into hush as the apartment settled around her. Her phone buzzed, a quiet text from Sarah. "Dinner Sunday?" She exhaled softly and typed back, "I'd like that." No guilt, no hesitation, just intention. Sunday evening arrived with the scent of roasted carrots and thyme. Emma stood in the doorway of her apartment, smoothing a simple dress she'd bought herself. There'd been no demands on her time all week. She'd kept her own calendar, and it felt good. She laughed quietly as she unlaced her sneakers and switched to flats before locking the door. At the shelter, she clocked out quietly, thanking Lisa on her way out. Lisa smiled, seeing the way Emma carried herself now, steady, purposeful. It was different from before, the gave everything Emma. This Emma paused, thought, and chose. The elevator ride felt suspended. She stepped out into the stairwell, took the steps 2 at a time. The sun beat through the high-ceilinged corridor as she walked to her new life. The doorbell rang, sharp, anticipatory. Emma peered through the peephole and saw Sarah wearing a fresh coat and nervous smile, and Ethan holding a bouquet of daisies that immediately softened Emma's chest. She opened the door. They stepped in with a quiet, mutual hesitation, arms empty, but presence full. Climbed the 2 steps into her sunny apartment. They paused by the entryway, as if not entirely sure it was theirs to enter. Then Emma guided them to the table. She had prepared simple salad, roasted chicken, fresh-baked bread. A mid-century lamp glowed on the buffet, the plant she'd nurtured now green and tall. It smelled like homecraft and quiet effort. They sat. Emily poured water, lifted glasses together. To beginnings. Conversation came slowly. Sarah talked about work projects and a new apartment search. Emma listened with openness, asking questions she'd never known to ask. Ethan shared a nervous grin about a semester presentation. Emma offered real encouragement. "I believe in you." They leaned in, shared laughter, no underlying tension. Between bites, Emma felt a soft flutter. Connection. A narrow bridge rebuilding across the years of distance. At sunset, they moved to the balcony. The city skyline shimmered, amber and violet. No dramatic speeches, no tears. Just things unsaid, presence enough. Emma looked at them, alive, near, not pleading. She realized that family didn't have to feel like chain-driven duty. It could be chosen, renewed, imperfectly alive. She sipped her wine. The wind teased her hair. "Thank you," she almost whispered. Sarah looked at her. "This means a lot, Mom." Emma's throat tightened, but her smile came steady and quiet. "Me too." Ethan stepped forward, handed Emma the daisies. "We wanted this to feel like a gift, not something you owed." Emma accepted them, pressing the petals to her collarbone. They glowed in the fading light. "No deadlines," Emma said. "Just us, choosing again. Together." Sarah's eyes shook with something hard-won. "Sounds good." Ethan nodded. They stood in the doorway, watching the sun sink fully. The city lights blinked awake. Emma felt the deepest kind of peace, not the kind of absence she'd fled, but the kind of belonging she'd built. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. She felt a flicker of hesitation. Then she slipped it away. Here now, no ghostly demands. She stepped into the living room where Sarah and Ethan lingered, voices soft with planning next Sunday's hike. Emma touched Sarah's arm. Ethan smiled at her across the room. It wasn't perfect, it was alive, and for the first time, at the end of a day that wasn't about serving or surviving, Emma watched the sunset and finally felt that this quiet, expanding warmth was enough. The future waited, not boisterous or certain, but steady, open, and entirely hers.